Welcome into Moments That Mattered. I'm Pete Hooley. I'm filling in for our fearless leader, Jack Heverin, who's been doing Coldplay. He started his FIBA break early, so I'm stepping in. Derek Rucker joins me as the FIBA break has started, but there's plenty to talk about, Ruck. We talk about moments that mattered, and the round delivered a lot.
Sure did, Hools. And I didn't know what to expect coming into round 9. I thought it was just going to be a nice, cruisy one to get us into the FIBA break. It was not that at all.
Let's start on a positive note because the Brisbane Bullets, and especially James Bateman, a record setting in the modern 40-minute era, 51 points. He did it super efficiently. Looking back at the game in particular, it was an outstanding performance.
It was, and we've seen him show flashes of being able to shoot the basketball at a very high level, but yesterday was otherworldly. He knocked down 3 after 3 after 3, and I like the fact that they really needed this. They needed that game. It was a Sunday afternoon game in Brisbane. They needed a crowd. They got a crowd. They needed a star performance, and he delivered exactly that, and 51 points, a tremendous feat by him. And I'm just so happy to see this guy thrive. I sat there courtside for so many of those Bullets games watching him go through it emotionally. So he shows a lot of resilience in being able to knock down that many points. And also, Pete, when he scores well, they win.
And this is the James Bateman that they were trying to recruit last year before ending up with Shannon Scott. They wanted to get him early. The struggles you talked about at the start of the season, to overcome this, like this is the 4th time he scored in double figures all season long, and it happened to be a 51-point game. 33 minutes played, he had 37 through 3 quarters, 0 turnovers, an unbelievable effort.
Right, and he's not probably as much of a playmaker and point guard as I had anticipated that he would be, but nobody cares. If he can score this type of, if he can have this type of scoring output more consistently, obviously we don't expect 30, 40-point games from him, but if he can be in that 20 to 25-point margin, because they need his scoring valuably, and Casey Prather not being in the lineup may have presented more opportunity for him.
Yeah, I think they're definitely trying to make him into that scorer or make him part of the team with that. And Keandre Cook's been their leading scorer so far this season. There was a 5-minute stretch in the 4th where they were going through Keandre, who was knocking him down. I was getting upset. They needed to feed the rock through James Bateman if he didn't get his opportunity. But Brisbane, the bounce back, their first doubleheader of the season. They went down to Tassie and lost. They bounced back. What did you take out of it as a whole? Because we saw the best game of the season so far from Rocco Zikarsky as well.
It was their first quality win, Pete. They've got 4 victories, but those 3 other ones came with asterisks attached to them. And Rocco was outstanding also. Tyrell Harrison got himself in foul trouble. Rocco was able to come in there and give you 13 points, 7 rebounds, a block shot. And I just liked his activity. And I think this is probably what so many fans of Rocco have been looking for. Just some court time to show how valuable his energy is and his size. And I thought it was a really, really big game for him.
The flip side of it is they beat up on the Perth Wildcats, who we know Bryce Cotton came back. They had a doubleheader as well this weekend. Bryce Cotton was unbelievable on Friday, hadn't missed a beat, had one of his slower, tougher games in his career, really, missing his first 11 field goals against Brisbane. Where are the Perth Wildcats at right now?
I think they're fine. And that bounce back game, after you have the spectacular return game, a lot of that is based on adrenaline, and you want to get back in there, and you're super motivated to do well. Now, you fly across the country. It's not a major excuse, but it's a reason. It wears you down. And Bryce probably had an emotional come down, too, after the big performance, and Brisbane were there to take advantage of it. They did a good job defensively. And just stepping back to Brisbane, I think that defensive performance is more what Justin Schuler's looking for. They were 9th in the league in defense going into that game, so now that gives them a defensive foundation upon which they can build. But the Perth Wildcats are still solid. Don't trip. They're going to be fine once they get those home games. We see how difficult it is to beat them in Perth, even without Bryce.
You mentioned Brisbane's defensive effort. Shout out Mitch Norton as well, because he, former teammate of Bryce Cotton, he went to him basically the whole game. But defensively for Perth, that's where I think a lot of the issues are coming from. The fans is coming from when we analyse games. They've been on the back-to-back weeks of Chris Golding's 46-point onslaught where he hit 9 threes and James Bateman did the same thing. Do you have concerns on the defensive end?
100%. And they're not alone. I put Adelaide in that same grouping. Even though Southeast Melbourne have improved defensively, we saw how they fell apart in Perth the other night. So those teams have to prove that they are legitimate defensive teams, irrespective of where they play the basketball game, and the jury is still out.
The big news from the weekend, the sour news that we have to talk about, is the fallout of the Melbourne and the Adelaide clash. There's two separate incidents to talk about. The first one that we wanted to have a touch on was the incident on the court. The Montrezl Harrell, Rob Lowe, and then Shea Ili gets involved, ends up with Harrell and Shea Ili getting ejected. The on-court scuffle as a whole, what was your take on that?
Well, Montrezl, everything he does is so violent, and he's a fast twitch monster, right? So anytime he does the slightest movement, it looks like it's more aggressive than what his intent probably is. Andrew Gaze and I had a difference of opinion on that foul. Drewy tends to think that Rob Lowe pulled Trez down. I thought the contact was there first from Montrezl. Whatever happened there, they both had to get up and clear the lane. They both were trying to do so. They're big men. They're physical people. Now, who instigated it? Who escalated it? There's no doubt. Shea Ili did it. Shea Ili came in justifiably. Now, I'm not knocking him. When you see someone do anything towards your teammate, you come in there. And Shea is like that. He is a great teammate. He came in there. He was not afraid of Montrezl. Shoved him. And then it went. And then it blew up. And I don't blame Shea for that. But I just point to the fact that he was the guy that caused the escalation.
And these on-court scuffles, the heated moments, you talk about Montrezl as the competitor that he is. Every player who steps across the white lines has that competitive spirit, and they will fly the flag for the teammates. We don't want to see that, but I think the part of it is that's inevitable at times when you've got some elite competitors going at it in a fierce battle. The two teams that are really trying to contend for a championship as well. Those things are going to happen. It's what transpired after we probably don't want to see it again.
That's correct. But also, some of this is the Melbourne United culture. They stick up for each other better than anyone else in the competition. They're probably as good as any team or any franchise has been throughout the course of NBL history. That starts with their coach, Dean Vickerman. That's a part of who they are. They don't care what's going on. If something is going down with one of their guys, they rally around him. You know that firsthand.
And again, we saw it in the dunk from Mitch Creek over Delhi in the throwdown a few years ago, and then Mason Peeling comes in. So you're spot on when you talk about the culture. We see this when it comes to professional sport, when you've got emotions are high, competitiveness is high. What transpired after, when we have to touch on a little bit, when you get involved with the fan, there is investigations ongoing, and they're going to be thorough for good reason. We never want to see the line cross between fans and players. We as a sport, basketball around the world, are in a unique spot where you can be this close to the professional athletes. You were there, we've seen it, we've all had run-ins, whether it's verbal, whatever it is, it's part of it, but the lines are pretty clear that we never want to see crossed like they were.
There is a trust and a respect that goes with sitting courtside that I believe fans must adhere to. The coaches walk around trusting that somebody's not crazy on the sidelines going to come and tackle them. The players walk right by the fans and the spectators. The referees do the same. This happens globally, and there is an inherent trust that must exist. When something happens like this, the integrity of that relationship starts to be eroded somewhat. So I'm not really casting any blame on anyone at the moment, but both parties, but in particular the fans, must not feel overly entitled. Sure, we love the fact that you pay top dollar for those seats, but at the same time, respect your position in the game and understand that these guys are out here doing what they love to do, and it's their livelihood.
And the position of the game is the one thing that's going to have a lot to transpire at. Because of what happened on the court, and everyone was trying to go their separate ways and just calm that situation down.
Kinda.
Shea Ili and Montrezl Harrell were probably going to be tossed anyway because of everything that transpired in that. And as we said, there's a very thorough investigation going on, and we understand there's going to be some penalties handed down, probably more so than a lot of people imagine. So we can't touch too much on it. Moving from that to what was a game of the round, a potential final series that I want to see. You were there as well, Sydney and Illawarra. What an atmosphere it was in the Wynn Entertainment Centre.
That place is slowly becoming one of the best places to view basketball games, especially meaningful, high-intensity games. Obviously, we know My State Bank Arena down in Hobart is probably the leader. RAC Arena is another fantastic place to be, John Cain. But Wynn Entertainment Center, the fans are right on you. And they only have one thing to do all week. That's support the Hawks. Get ready for that Hawks game. I'm sure they probably all have their routine as fans, what they want to do. And Pete, they were so juiced up from the jump. In the pregame, Brad, Joe, and I could barely hear ourselves, even with the earpieces in. That's how intense and electric that atmosphere was. And the team, the way they play, the way they carry themselves, it perfectly suits the crowd and the environment.
There's probably more reason to make sure they continue to sell that out, because it was unbelievable to watch. And again, you talking about to be able to be there and live it. The Illawarra Hawks, you called for it last week for them to answer the challenge of going against a big team once again. They've failed a couple of those tests so far this season before the FIBA break, but they stood up and they answered the call.
They defended. And I thought after the first quarter, they totally disrupted what Sydney were trying to do on the offensive end. Xavier Cooks was not bad in the game, but he wasn't dominant. He wasn't highly impactful. And I thought Illawarra, through their bigs, through Sam Froling, just were able to continually get buckets, attack the paint, and put Sydney in really vulnerable positions. And then also, Young Jung Lee comes off the bench and absolutely goes nuts in that second period and got the place absolutely jumping.
Well, we talk about moments that matter. The bank from Young Jong Lee, they spoke out in their press conference 100% on purpose.
Oh, yes, we've seen him do this numbers of times. But he especially does it when he's cooking.
Yeah.
He's like, I got a little something extra for you. Shot fake, sidestep, bank. But the bank shot going that way at that angle is particularly tough. But that guy is a high-level shooter. And, you know, in the offseason, Pete, I was surprised he did not garner more attention from other clubs.
Yeah, he's an exceptional talent. Again, he's providing that spark off the bench for the Illawarra Hawks. They took care of business against the rivalry, which is real. That rivalry is real against the Sydney Kings. Where are the Kings at as we lead into this FIBA break? Brian Goorjian said that it's now playing for their season, which I think is probably a bit much considering where they are on the ladder and there's so much left of the season. But we haven't seen them anywhere near close to their full potential.
And it's shocking. I can't believe it. And I knew that it was going to be hard for them to go into Illawarra and win that game, okay? But it was one of those games that we've seen Brian Goorjian coach teams take advantage of and move on to the next level. Instead of being 7-6, you know, 8-5 looks entirely different. And Brian Goorjian's not having to make those statements. Now they've won 3 in a row if they could have come out of there with a victory. Instead, Pete, they're back in a mess. They're only 2 games above Tasmania, who we have said have been terrible this season. And you just don't want to be in that muddle because you just don't know what's going to happen. You get an injury, somebody gets sick, you have a bad shooting performance, and you drop a game you shouldn't. I don't think in and of itself this game at Illawarra is a bad loss. But given the context and moving forward, Goorjian would be very concerned about his team.
Yeah, you fast forward to the end of the season, if you're in an elimination play-in tournament against the Tasmania Jack Jumpers who find form there, that is not where you want to be at all.
Especially if you got a healthy Will Magnay. The fortunes of that team change entirely. Now Doyle has freedom. Jordan Crawford has freedom. They don't need to be as tight and as efficient as I would like them to be. They can just do what they got to do to win the game.
Let's touch on the Tasmania Jack Jumpers quickly because Milton Doyle was outstanding. This is the Milton Doyle that we all know and love. And it's no surprise that he did this with the first game back from Sean McDonald as well.
They're a great pairing. And you can see Doyle has tremendous confidence in moving off the ball when Sean McDonald is there. He doesn't have to spend as much time on the ball. He can pick and choose his opportunities to inject himself. And Sean McDonald is a very good basketball player. He plays at a high level. He's intelligent. He can shoot the basketball. He provides a serious perimeter threat. And he's got size, Pete. He is a big point guard. And again, that helps Crawford because all of a sudden now on the defensive end, you can put Crawford in places where he is less vulnerable. So where we may have felt Tasmania were in a bit of trouble, they've done a good job over the past 2 to 3 rounds to put themselves back in the mix.
On Milton Doyle, is this the level of aggression that you need to see from him for the rest of the season? He took the first 3, knocked it down in the next play, tried to dunk it on half of Brisbane, but it clearly showed a shift in his mindset.
And I think Leonard Copeland is our guy who has been most frustrated. He's been so frustrated by Milton's mixed aggression. And Milton just needs to go for it. Don't worry about all the percentages and all that stuff. Worry about being aggressive and making plays. And I think he is such a class player that the rest will take care of itself.
Some other big news to come out of the round, and again, New Zealand went up to Cairns. They get a big win on the road, but the reports, as we record this, the reports started to filter out that it looks like Freddy Gillespie and the New Zealand Breakers are going to be parting ways. We saw it at the end of the game with Cairns, the way that the players in the New Zealand Breakers got around Freddie. Just that as a whole, before we even talk about potential replacements, if that's the way they go down, does it shock you?
Somewhat, and I really like Freddy Gillespie, and he's done a really good job. We talked about James Bateman responding. Well, Freddy Gillespie had a moment at the Blitz that shocked all of us. He headbutted Sean Bruce, and he received a lot of scrutiny. He had to miss some time. But since then, he's become a really, really good NBL big man. He does all the things that I would look for from my big man. He runs the floor. He's great in pick and roll. He rebounds well. He's a really good shot blocker and rim protector. And the thing that I didn't realize he was going to be good at was the finishing around the bucket, the mid-range jumper. He's been outstanding. He's not thirsty for the basketball, which helps as well. And he's been a key reason why the Breakers are off to this really good start leading into the FIBA break.
Yeah, sitting up near the top of the table as well. And again, you talk about the combination with PJC. So with those reports that we're hearing, and it looks like the Freddy Gillespie potentially going to be parting ways, it opens the door for what we keep hearing, what we have heard for. Oh, it's taco time. It could very well be taco time. I thought that's what I keep hearing. If Taco Fall joins this Breakers roster, knowing that he hasn't been fully healthy up until maybe a couple of days ago, if that's the replacement player they go down, what do you think he brings to the Breakers and what do you think he brings to the league?
Well, naturally, he brings great size. He's got NBA experience. He's a talent. He will have to be utilized in a very specific way in our league. Our league is tricky. It's different to the NBA. And sometimes you can actually be too big. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on that coaching staff to figure out how do we utilize him best. Keep in mind that Jonah Bolden also did the calf. He'll be out 3 to 4 weeks. So New Zealand, in that first week and returning after the FIBA break, they'll need to have some things in place in how they want to play, knowing that they'll only have Menenga, Fall, Anticevich, and they're going to have to make that work. And it's a challenge. You don't want, the thing I worry about, Pete, is do they disrupt their rhythm and what they've established right now?
Well, it's definitely two ends of the spectrum. Again, if Taco Fall is announced as a replacement player, I'm sure there's plenty of options out there as well. You've got PJC on one end, Taco Fall on the other. So it'll be a fascinating watch one way or another. Before we wrap up Moments That Mattered, some other big news and one of the best moments, I think, for Australian basketball. The deal officially signed with the WNBL. The excitement of what this means for female basketballers in Australia. I'm excited sitting here talking about it. I know you are as well.
Well, the WNBL is a league that has always been full of elite talent. And if you look at the rosters now, a lot of our bronze medal opalists play in the WNBL. It is a very strong competition. And now, with the full resources of the National Basketball League, it is going to do wonders for that competition and deservingly so for all those female outstanding athletes.
Yeah, you're spot on. Again, we've got exceptional women all around the world and hopefully be able to bring as many of them back as we can to the WNBL to continue to grow the game. A lot has transpired in the last few days. It's been a lot leading up to 9 rounds of the NBL season. Rucker, appreciate you.
Hey, thumbs up to you for filling in for the great Jack Heverin.
It's a very hard role.
It is. I actually texted him. And thumbs down will go to Jack Heverin also because I texted him seeing how he was doing and he's having a great time. He's having a great time. Very brief one-word replies.
Oh, he has been having a good time. I saw him at Coldplay. I didn't want to take your segment. That's you too. Thank you, everybody, for listening. There's going to be a heap of content coming out on NBL socials throughout the FIBA break. This has been Moments That Mattered.